What's up, people? Hotep Jesus, we back. We are back. Good morning. Happy Monday. A little bit of Monday afternoon grift. Or was this morning? I'm sorry. You see, I'm like completely out of it. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. But I saw this and I jumped up out of bed and I said, "Oh, they're talking about Trump today. Trump's my guy. I want to hear this." You know, it's the hypocrite in me. You know, and one day I say, "Oh, you know, like when I think it was the first night Hotep been told you, I was like, oh, tonight's gonna be a nothing burger, you know, and it pretty much nothing really like was. There was no highlight from that. I think it was last Thursday, but today, however, my spirit told me there were going to be fireworks today. It's Monday. If we look at the numerology, it's the 13th. Now, if you know the Illuminati, like I know the Illuminati, you already know. You got to be on your P's and Q's on a day like today. You just do. You got to be on your P's and Q's, bro. So I said, no, I think I want to capture this moment where they're talking about my guy, Trump. Apparently they're calling this day 2. I feel like what type of marketing and branding are they doing here for this to be day 2? I am confusion. How is this day 2? What is this? Okay, so what is this? Day 2 of what? This is the House panel investigating the Jan 6 insurrection. Presents more of its findings to the public on Monday, June 13th. The hearing, the second of several planned by the Jan 6 committee in the coming weeks, will focus on former President Donald Trump's level of involvement leading up to and on the day of the attack on the Capitol. This is the excerpt at the bottom of this video from PBS here. Wow. Day 2, I feel like this is day 102 of the hearings. Where have I been? Am I, what is going on? The key words here. I'll show you that. I'll put that on your screen. You guys can see what I'm looking at here when I say keywords. I have this little cool tool that shows me keywords, right, that they're targeting. It's just metadata. It's all public information. It's nothing quite secret. Obviously, Jan 6, right? Capitol insurrection, Trump. This one popped out to me. Election fraud and election insecurity. There's a lot to say about that. I remember when Trump won. Those were the exact claims from Hillary Clinton and the rest. They said the Russians rigged the election. So they said, and then the following election, they said, oh no, our system's perfect. It could never happen. It's just quite odd and weird and very Twilight Zone-ish. I'm just in awe of it all. So yeah, so let's see, what else do we got here? Proud Boys. We have the Proud Boys here. We all know about the informants involved in that situation. You know what keyword I don't see here, though? I don't see Mr. Ray Epps. I don't see it. Are they going to talk about it? Can we talk about it? I keep seeing this name, Ray Epps. Just wondering, are they going to talk about it or not? Or nah? Are we talking about it or nah? Like, you know, is that Something we can't talk about? Just let me know the rules. Ministry of Truth. I just want to know the rules. Can we lay this out somewhere publicly? Has this been? Can you show me? Somebody please show me where it says you cannot talk about Ray apps. I just want to know. I don't know. I'm trying to get myself up to date here. It's just a boggle of mine. A boggle, if you will. Let me see. Washington Post has this. So they're late. But anyway, let's see. What are their keywords? Breaking news, live speeches. I really feel like, well, this is what I think. Whole stock market down. I'm just getting notifications. Down. Hotep's been told you. Hotep's been told you, man. A whole lot of Hoteps. If you study monetary policy, you knew a crash was coming. If you read the book Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, I always talk about it, great book. That's why sometimes I've had people ask me, say, Hotep, why don't you write a book on, investing and da-da-da-da? And I'm like, there's so much of that out there. I think there's so much great material out there. I don't think I could do it justice. There's so much great material out there, like, go read that. You don't need, I don't think, and they say, but people need it dumbed down for them, and you really know how to simplify things, and I totally get that. And I think I did write a little bit of investing tips in The Unbreakable Rules of Masculinity is a chapter on money. So I did talk a little bit. I was able to express it in that book, but I am under the notion that when people really want the information, they'll go get it. They'll sit down and learn. When somebody wants something, they'll do it. Usually, if you have to spoon feed people and you have to force people to eat, usually what you have is somebody who's dependent on you, which means you probably have some sort of liability attached to you. And liabilities are just yucky. Nobody likes liabilities, especially when they're people liabilities. Emmanuel Presley says, HJ, we need a presentation about obesity being pushed on the black community. They are calling body mass racist. It's funny, if you go look back at my old videos, you'll see me talking about that problem a long time ago. Maybe I'll do one. On obesity. It's not a bad idea, Emmanuel. It's not a bad idea at all. I actually kind of like it. Willie Handy 79. He said that Hotep. Wait, hold on. Where's that? I done did it so long.
That Hotep Jesus dude.
Yes, sir. Robert said, wow, had to unsub and resub just to chat. Yeah. It gets a little funny on the tubes. Shout out to the homies at Cash At Me. GSAS, I appreciate you. Khalid Cooper, as always. Digital, Game Digital. Stephen Jermaine. Stephen Jermaine, appreciate you. Shout out to my people that Cash At Me, support the channel. $, Hotep Jesus. Support the channel. Support me. And we grow. We're going to do amazing things. We are doing amazing things. HotepCon 2022. Las Vegas, Nevada. We're going to be at the Ahern Hotel. We have accommodations available now at hotepnation.com. Please go to hotepnation.com. Still early bird tickets available. This is the second round of early bird tickets. Price went up a little bit on the second round. They're going to go up again on the third round. Get 10% off with promo codes from Canon Hotep, Uncle Hotep, and Chad. Chad's coupon code is FBI. Canon's coupon code is Canon. And Uncle Hotep's coupon code is Shine. Yeah. So it's going to be great. I think the event is going to be really awesome. In fact, we have some great special guests I'll be announcing soon. You're going to love those individuals. Great minds, great people, great voices. What else do we have? The accommodations include food. They include food and a 3-night hotel stay at the luxurious Ahern Hotel. It's very quiet. It's no slot machines in there. So if you're looking for slot machines, you're looking to gamble, it's probably not the hotel for you. Maybe you want to go stay somewhere else. But it's right there. I mean, Ahern's right there on the strip. You know, what's the name? The slot machines are around the corner. It's Las Vegas. You know, you can't dodge it. But what I like about the hotel is that it doesn't have the slot machines. It doesn't have that gambling vibe, because every time I come out of my hotel room in any other hotel, I'm just launched into a video game. And it's just like ding, 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 ding. And it's all I hear. And it's actually, you know, day 3 of Vegas. I'm like, okay, I got to go home. This is just too much for me. I just can't do all the video game noises and, you know, dopamine driving mechanisms with which the scientists out of Harvard have come up with to keep people spending money, right? Oh my God, it's just, no, I can't be around it for too long. And I'm not a gambler. I particularly don't gamble. It's not in my nature to take risks like that. But yeah, so I like the Ahern Hotel because, well, it doesn't have that issue. It doesn't have these noises. Oh my God, it's just terrible. I feel like Sonic the Hedgehog bouncing around. Or what level was that? Yo, Chad, what level was that? The casino level. Was it called the casino level in Sonic the Hedgehog, man? Just hear ringing all the time. Ring, 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 ring. I'm sorry. It just really annoys me. It just really grinds my gears. It really grinds my gears. So Ahern doesn't have that, which is why, like, when I came out of my hotel room and I was like, okay, we're in Vegas, and it's just like, this is perfect. It's great. You know, it's great. It's just a nice vibe. I can be quiet. I can kick it. You know, if I want to go see some madness, I can go see some madness. If I want to chill, I can chill. So that's what we're having the event at. I just want to know why the hearings are on Shine Time. Can we talk about that? This is ghetto. This is ghetto. What kind of government is this? This is absolutely Casino Night Zone. Thank you, Staff Colonel. That was the level on Sonic. Casino Night Zone. Yes. L1L Hotep said, I'll see you at HotepCon. Bless up. I'll see you there. Jabari Judah said they pump oxygen in those gambling hotels to keep you up all night. Thank the Most High, Hotep Nation. Got a good hotel with no distractions. Say, boom, shout out to Jabari. But how ghetto is this? This is absolutely ghetto. I'm gonna need DC to get it together. I need DC to get it together. What is this? Showtime at the Apollo? Even Showtime at the Apollo starts on time. What? Do they still have Showtime at Apollo? I'm sure they do. That shit's classic. It's always a good time. If you guys are ever in New York, you should go to Showtime at the Apollo. You definitely go check out a show there. It's amazing, amazing experience. It's in Harlem. I want to say 125th Street. Let me see. Let's see. Showtime at the Apollo. What's the venue? Apollo Theater. Thank you. Yeah, 125th Street, 253 West 125th Street, between Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard and Frederick Douglass Boulevard in Harlem. Yeah. Your show rebooted in 2018. Okay, so it's back. Yeah. Okay, dope. Yeah, Showtime Apollo is a great time. Absolutely wonderful time. They have all types of acts, and if you're not familiar, they have all types of acts that come out. You know, you might sing, they might do comedy, they might rap, they might dance. You never know what somebody might do at Showtime at the Apollo, and these people come to show their talents. And damn, what's the clown name, yo? Damn, I'm slipping. Uncle Hotep would take 10 black points away from me for forgetting the old boy name. But if you trash, they sound the signal. The horn start going off. Then the clown come out. He grab the hook. He grab you with the hook and just pull your ass off stage. Like, nah, you gotta go. They snatch you up and they take you right off stage. And then you rub on the wood for good luck. Rub on the wood for good luck before you go on stage. Like, rub on the wood, rub on the wood. Sandman, thank you. Goddamn Sandman. Sandman, that's his name. Comes out with the hook. It's like a nigga in blackface or some shit. You come out tap dancing. Hook your ass and pull you right on stage. Showtime at the Apollo, you should go. I think it's just like a show once a week or something like that. Let me see if there's a website. This is not a paid advertisement either. Let's see. So it said episode 17 was May 5th, 2021. But usually you can just go there. And yeah, I thought they had a... Let me just go to the Apollo Theater website. It's a great time. Apollo Theater. Yeah. Okay, so here we are. Apollo Theater. Amateur night. Okay. Buy tickets. Yeah, it's still running. Yeah, it's still running. I'll put it on the screen right now. You guys can see it. It's a great time. Bong. See it there. Amateur night at the Apollo. That's what it's called. Amateur night at the Apollo. Go get you some tickets. Hit buy tickets. And, you know what I mean? Here's the calendar. So this one was June 15th. I guess this is June 15th coming up. What they got? Yeah, they launched the careers. Ella Fitzgerald, Lauryn Hill. Yeah, Lauryn Hill was definitely on there. Machine Gun Kelly, Jasmine Sullivan, D'Angelo. Yeah. Grab your crew to book your group of 10 or more. What? No buy button? Yo, Apollo got it. I gotta holler at them. It should be like a buy button right here. I shouldn't have to send an email. They should be accepting Bitcoin too. Like, am I missing something? Oh, here we go. Why is that so small? Oh, Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster owns everything. Wow. Ticketmaster owns everything. You can get these seats right there on the side of the front stage, $175 a piece. Ticketmaster got every venue. Yo, this is the most ghetto government ever. Most ghetto government ever. Project Group, what up, yo? She said, is that Hotep fruit just fine Monday morning or not? Oh, man. Oh Lord. Hey, look, my bad. Look. Listen. I gotta have a talk. I got plantain. It's fried, but I got plantain. It's fried, but I got plantain. This is my. I'm plant based. I'm sorry, yo. I'm gonna get right. I promise. I'm gonna get right. I promise. Dylan Geiger said hearing is a distraction. Yeah, yes, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a big ass distraction. That's why I'm trying to figure out how the hell they call this shit day 2. You know? Day 2. I got a day alone today. Y'all done fucked up. I ain't got shit to do today. It's Monday. Kids out of school. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gotta worry about the baby. No, I'm on their ass today. I am on their ass today. Emmanuel Presley says, I think a hedge fund owns all of New York. I can neither confirm nor deny. Ticketmaster Griff, yo. He said this looks so low budget. I can't believe they hired a producer for this. Word. He said they late because they don't have a case. LP said the grift is on today. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Monday, I ain't got no job. I ain't got shit to do. I actually have a day to myself for once. I've just moved recently. So, life has been hectic. I just had a baby. That's hectic. Are we moving into the hearings now? Are they getting they ghetto asses in their seats? This is just ghetto. This is just absolutely ghetto. We're not even going to use that one. What is this lady saying? Let's listen. Can y'all hear that?
Those election results, but 140,000 documents, 1,000 witnesses and interviews who've come before the committee. You have to imagine we'll be seeing more of those kinds of video clips like we saw last week, more records being brought forward, potentially more messages between some of these people. The committee says they're letting the facts lead the case and that the facts themselves will tell the story. So we'll be watching that story as it unfolds on this second day of those hearings.
As we mentioned earlier, you were there that day. You bore witness to what happened, both as a journalist and as a human being. With that in mind, and with the fact that you've continued to report on this throughout the days, months, weeks that have passed, what will you be paying most attention to today in this hearing?
One of the pieces that got a little bit of attention in the first hearing that might get additional attention today and in future hearings was what the people who were out there that day believed to be true. And I can tell you firsthand from my reporting, every single person we talked to who had come into the Capitol grounds
Lauren
that
said they
day,
holding
and I'm
her
talking
hostage.
about people who got in their car and drove 7, 8, 9, 10 hours just to be there. A couple of people I met who flew in from California just to be there. Central to their decision to be outside that day, whether they participated in any violent act or not, was the idea that the election was
how they lock you in the closet,
that Donald Trump had actually won the 2020 presidential election, and something was going to happen.
This lady is so low budget.
Stop the certification.
She's so low budget. They sent her out there to cover this. She has nothing to say. She has nothing of substance to say. She's just rambling with a bunch of talking points and keywords, and they got her locked in the closet. The chat is roasting her right now. This is wild.
That's absolutely true. So for me, I think I'm going to be watching to see if more of that kind of language is included. I also think some new folks we're hearing from, Chris Steyerwalt among them, could reveal some new information about some of the coordination and messaging, about how potent that message could be. believe that Mr. Trump was led to believe or continued to say that he won the election, even though the facts were presented to him, even though person after person told him he didn't, in fact, win. And so I think those are the kinds of things I'm looking for. But again, tens of thousands of records and 1,000, witness interviews later, I think the committee knows it has to build a pretty strong case if anyone's minds are actually going to be changed.
Okay. So she said something key right there. Changed in people's minds. Right? That's what this is about. This shit is about warping the minds of the public, skewing their ideas in the favor of the establishment. That's what this is about. It's not even about the minds inside those courtrooms. The minds inside that courtroom is made up. It's been made up already. Everybody in that room already knows how they feel about this thing. Nobody in that room or any room associated with it are going to be swayed. So who are they trying to sway? They're trying to sway the opinions of the public. But they have nothing. This lady looks worried. She's nervous. Look at her hands. She's nervous. She don't know what to type on that keyboard. They have nothing. These people have nothing. And they're supposed to be talking about Trump today. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Allegedly. What are you going to say? He told people to gather at the Capitol, which is something legal to do. But I'm not even here for the Dems. I don't care about the Dems. We expect the Dems to do dem things. I want to see what some of these Republicans step up and do. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. I want to see how many turncoats we got out here. Might got to do some house cleaning. The hearing will begin soon. This is ghetto. Hold on a second. I'll be right back. This is ghetto. Why hasn't this started yet? Why hasn't this started yet? Absolutely ghetto. They lucky I got time. They lucky I got time. Officers smiling and opening doors. Gonna be the video clip too. They're not gonna show you that. They're not gonna show you that. They're not gonna show you that. They just out here wasting all kinds of taxpayer money running up the bill. For real. For real. I wonder if they hold on, let me fix my screens. I'm all discombobulated. Actually, let me put this one here. Let me put this one here. Okay, that's better. Cameraman don't know what to film. Bro, for real. Dems know they're going to lose Metro. This is wild. He said they could have took this case to Hotep court. Oh, Lord. VJ Sierra said, will they be interviewing Ray Epps? Man, that's what I'm trying to figure out. This is their last-ditch effort to try their very best to sway some folks to not vote for Republicans come November. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. To take the jury pool and judges for those still in jail waiting. Said people in masks be looking so stressed. I don't get it. I don't know why they still wearing them things. We free now. We free. These people still got them on. Oh boy, dedicated. He got the official jump off right here. This ain't no N95, but or N45 or whatever it was. The N187, whatever. He tried to say Ray Epps is innocent. How he innocent? I heard him. I seen the video. Was it AI made the video? This is ghetto. This is absolutely ghetto. It's so bad. PBS don't even know how to do coverage on it. PBS don't even know how to do coverage on it. Y'all need to fire the people at PBS. Ain't that a government-run station? Isn't this a government-run station? Lord, please tell me. Somebody tell me, please. PBS. Let's see. Publicly funded nonprofit organization. Okay. All right. But goddamn, you couldn't hire nobody that could bullshit. They should have hired the Hoteps. PBS should have hired me. I could have went down there, and I could have been commentating on this whole thing. Me and Uncle Hotep. Why is we not there? Why is we not there? Taxpayer funded station. Yep. Thank you, Trish. What up, Trish? This is terrible. You couldn't find anybody in that building that could bullshit for 2 minutes. You couldn't interview the camera guy. Somebody. Look at all these people just standing around. Look at this. So the media is filming the media. That's what we're looking at right now. The media filming the media. This is unprofessional. This is unprofessional by the government. This is unprofessional by PBS. It's so bad PBS can't even fill space for the government. I'd have been giving niggas tours. I'd have been in the Capitol. I'm like, we're going to cut to Hotep Jesus. He's at the Capitol right now. I'm like, this is the room AOC was in. This is the room AOC was in when she was terrified. Look, I'm going to sit under the desk just like her. You'd have seen me underneath the desk. She was probably shaking like this. I'd have been giving people a tour of the Capitol. These are the doors that were breached. Like, come on, yo. If y'all gonna make TV, y'all gonna make Hollywood, y'all gonna make movies, y'all gonna make fiction, be good at your job. Jesus. They know they don't even have to be good at their job. This is crazy. Still 10 minutes according to C-SPAN. What? Lord have mercy. This is wild. This is ghetto. AOC was down the street crying. He said if they showed where AOC was at, they'd have to leave the building. Oh my lord. Oh my god. Said AOC took a Stafford shoes. Come on, man. AOC was fearing for her life, bro. Stop it. How much you think they paying her for this stunt? AOC getting paid good money. She eating real good. You know, that's the thing with government. Everybody in government eats. You work for the government, everybody eats. Even the little guy in government eats really well. You get to retire after 25 years instead of like 80 or whatever it is in the corporate world. I mean, 25 years. Go to the military to get your school. You know what I'm saying? If you join the gang, hey, if you join the gang, they take care of you. That's the thing about, joining powerful gangs. AOC should be a lifetime Grifty nominee. He said, how much is this costing all of us? We giving Ukraine $40 billion. We having crazy inflation, gas is through the roof, and these fools playing around for this bootleg production. Bro, this is ghetto. I see some more individuals have gathered. The room's starting to fill a little bit. I wonder who they're waiting on. They probably waiting on the judge. We waiting on the judge, I bet. His ghetto ass. This is just terrible. Imagine if these folks worked this hard to bring fuel prices back under $2 a gallon. What, man? Oh, man. Oh, man. He said, how many vacations you think everyone in that room got? Oh, man, it's a bunch of boosters in there. But it's a bunch of fake boosters, too. It's a whole lot of privileged people. He said, Judge, what the fuck you saying? I'm sorry, Chairman, whoever the nigga that sits in the center up there. People there to pay tribute to Saya. Jay Pylon said they saving us from white supremacy. Oh, man. Where is this committee? If you ain't got your case together by now, you ain't got a case. If you ain't got your case together by now, you ain't got a case. You might as well just say, fuck it. Postpone it. We'll see you Wednesday. That's what they might as well do right now. That's what they might as well do. You know what I'm saying? You'd be fuckery afoot on the 13th. Illuminati like to play games. They be looking at the calendar and they be plotting shit on the calendars. That's why I'm here today. Because my spirit told me to be here, number one, and then I saw the numerology, number two, and I said, all right. And everybody was leaving, so I was going to be good by myself today. Oh, yeah, let's rock. We can get some work done today. Shout out to Syscoin. Sponsor this month. Make sure y'all go check them out. Make sure you check out Syscoin. More specifically for the blockchain developers. If you're a blockchain developer and you want to do something wild, like, I don't know, put the world financial system on the blockchain, maybe check out Syscoin. It's got the security of Bitcoin with the flexibility of Ethereum. So if Bitcoin and Ethereum had a baby, potentially it'd beat Syscoin. Make sure you guys go check out Syscoin for all my blockchain developers. Appreciate you. Natasha Kayleen is in the Hotep chat, Discord, chatting it up, having fun with the good folks in there. The reasons for the delay is because the wife of Trump's campaign manager went into labor. What? The hell are you talking about? Somebody baby about to be born on the 13th? Where'd you get this from, Faith Thomas? This guy's wife went into labor. People, chill. Whose wife? Stepion's wife went into labor. Lordy. Who the hell is Stepien? Oh, let's see. Let's dig. Let's see. Who is Bill Stepien and why he is testifying on Jan 6? On Monday, investigating host a public hearing for witnesses, including Trump's campaign man. Stepien was subpoenaed by he is currently an advisor. Oh. Associated fundraising, the committee said at the time the messaging included promotion of certain false claims related to voting machines. Once W took over Trump's campaign in 2020, he was viewed as an operative with ties to the traditional. Bill knows who the boss is. So is he about to snitch? Was Stepien about to snitch? Chris Christie. Christie said he was disturbed by the tone of behavior and the cows and difference in emails from Stepien at the time, adding that it made me lose confidence in Bill's judgment. Former governor of the state was praising Stepien. Okay. Stepien. Local Republican campaigns. He also ran field programs. Stepien worked for. So Stepien was supposed to testify today. Question is, chat, please inform me. Was he about to snitch? Was Stepien about to snitch? Is that what's going on? Y'all know I don't follow this stuff. I just study the history. Renee Vogel said 13 is my favorite number. I got married on the 13th, Friday the 13th. Word. Fire. Know the power. Take back the power of these numbers. It's not someone that will help the defense. You bet your ass on that. Yo, they not about to wait for this lady to have a baby. Just so they could. Is he about to snitch? He said Uncle Hotep about to come through the door. Was he about to snitch? Somebody tell me what's going on, man. I told you, funny things happen on the 13th.
This program was made possible by contributions to the PBS station from viewers like you.
Oh, thank snap. You. They cut to a commercial, bro. They cut to a break. Wow. This is ghetto.
To this PBS NewsHour special live coverage of the January 6th hearings held by the Select Committee of the House of Representatives to investigate last year's attack on the United States Capitol. This is the second in a series of hearings the committee plans to hold over the next 2 weeks. Today's hearings is starting a little later this morning than expected because of a last-minute witness change. Bill Stepien, who was former President Trump's campaign manager at the end of the campaign, will not be appearing due to a family emergency, we are told. And we are watching live pictures of the hearing. We're going to go there just as soon as Chairman Benny Thompson calls the committee to order. As we wait, we'll say that in the hearing last Thursday, Chairman Thompson and Republican Representative Liz Cheney, there you see her on his left, on your right, they laid out their cases. They placed blame for inciting the attack squarely on former President Trump.
Oh, man.
Let's go to Chairman Thompson.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during today's hearing. Good morning. Last week, the Select Committee laid out a preview of our initial findings about the conspiracy overseen and directed by Donald Trump to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and block the transfer of power, a scheme unprecedented in American history. My colleagues and I don't want to spend time talking about ourselves during these hearings, but as someone who's run for office a few times, I can tell you at the end of a campaign, it all comes down to the numbers. The numbers tell you the winner and the loser. For the most part, the numbers don't lie. But if something doesn't add up with the numbers, you go to court to get resolution. And that's the end of the line. We accept those results. That's what it means to respect the rule of law. That's what it means to seek elective office in our democracy. Because those numbers aren't just numbers, they're votes. They're your votes. They are the will and the voice of the people. And the very least we should expect from any person seeking a position of public trust is the acceptance of the will of the people, win or lose. Donald Trump didn't. He didn't have the numbers, he went to court. He still didn't have the numbers, he lost. But he betrayed the trust of the American people. He ignored the will of the voters. He lied to his supporters and the country. And he tried to remain in office after the people had voted him out, and the courts upheld the will of the people. This morning, we'll tell the story of how Donald Trump lost an election and knew he lost an election, and as a result of his loss, decided to wage an attack on our democracy, an attack on the American people by trying to rob you of your voice in our democracy, and in doing so, lit the fuse that led to the horrific violence of January 6th, when a mob of his supporters stormed the Capitol sent by Donald Trump to stop the transfer of power. Today, my colleague from California, Ms. Lofgren, and our witnesses will detail the Select Committee's findings on these matters. But first, I will recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening statement she'd care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Last week, as the chairman noted, our committee began outlining a 7-part plan overseen by President Trump to overturn the 2020 election. Today, we will begin looking at the initial part of that plan. President Trump's effort to convince millions of Americans that the election was stolen from him by overwhelming fraud. A federal court has already reviewed elements of the committee's evidence on this point and said this, quote, "In the months following the election, numerous credible sources from the president's inner circle to agency leadership and statisticians informed President Trump and Dr. Eastman that there was no evidence of election fraud," close quote, sufficient to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The court's opinion methodically documents each of the principal reasons for that conclusion, and I would urge all those watching to read it. Today, we will begin to show the American people some of our evidence. Today, you will hear much more from former Attorney General Bill Barr's recorded testimony, and you will hear in greater detail what others in the department told President Trump, that his claims of election fraud were nonsense. You will also hear much more from President Trump's own campaign experts, who had also concluded that his fraud claims could not be supported. Let me focus briefly on just 3 points now. First, you will hear firsthand testimony that the president's campaign advisors urged him to await the counting of votes and not to declare victory on election night. The president understood even before the election that many more Biden voters had voted by mail because President Trump ignored the advice of his campaign experts and told his supporters only to vote in person. Donald Trump knew before the election that the counting of those mail-in ballots in several states would not begin until late in the day and would not be complete for multiple days. This was expected, reported, and widely known. You will also hear testimony that President Trump rejected the advice of his campaign experts on election night and instead followed the course recommended by an apparently inebriated Rudy Giuliani to just claim he won and insist that the vote counting stop, to falsely claim everything was fraudulent. He falsely told the American people that the election was not legitimate. In his words, quote, a major fraud. Millions of Americans believed him. Second, pay attention to what Donald Trump and his legal team said repeatedly about Dominion voting machines. Far-flung conspiracies with a deceased Venezuelan communist allegedly pulling the strings. This was, quote, complete nonsense, as Bill Barr said. President Trump's own campaign advisors, his Department of Justice, and his cybersecurity experts all told him the same thing. Here, for example, is White House lawyer Eric Hirschman. His view was shared by many of the Trump team whom we interviewed.
I thought the Dominion stuff was, I never saw any evidence whatsoever to sustain those allegations.
And third, as Mike Pence's staff started to get a sense for what Donald Trump had planned for January 6th, they called the campaign experts to give them a briefing on election fraud and all the other election claims. On January 2nd, the general counsel of the Trump campaign, Matthew Morgan, this is the campaign's chief lawyer, summarized what the campaign had concluded weeks earlier, that none of the arguments about fraud or anything else could actually change the outcome of the election.
Generally discussed on that topic was whether the fraud, maladministration, abuse, or irregularities, if aggregated and read most favorably to the campaign, would that be outcome determinative? And I think everyone's assessment in the room, at least amongst the staff, Mark Short, myself, and Greg Jacob, was that it was not sufficient to be outcome determinative.
As is obvious, this was before the attack on the Capitol. The Trump campaign legal team knew there was no legitimate argument, fraud, irregularities, or anything to overturn the election. And yet President Trump went ahead with his plans for January 6th anyway. Mr. Chairman, hundreds of our countrymen have faced criminal charges. Many are serving criminal sentences because they believed what Donald Trump said about the election, and they acted on it. They came to Washington, D.C. at his request. They marched on the Capitol at his request. And hundreds of them besieged and invaded the building at the heart of our constitutional republic. As one conservative editorial board put it recently, quote, Mr. Trump betrayed his supporters by conning them on January 6th, and he is still doing it. Another conservative editorial board that has long supported President Trump said last week, Donald Trump, quote, won't stop insisting that 2020 was stolen, even though he has offered no proof that that is true. And this, Donald Trump now, quote, clings to more fantastical theories, such as Dinesh D'Souza's debunked 2,000 mules, even as recounts in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin confirm Trump lost. Those are the correct conclusions to draw from the evidence gathered by this committee. We have much more evidence to show the American people on this point than we can reasonably show in one hearing.
So you have nothing.
Today, we will begin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Damn. Republicans turning on Trump.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In our opening hearing, we gave an overview of our investigation into the January 6th attack. The plot to overthrow the election was complex and had many parts, which we'll explore in remaining hearings. But today, we examine the false narrative that the 2020 election was, quote, stolen. Former President Trump's plan to overturn the election relied on a sustained effort to deceive millions of Americans with knowingly false claims of election fraud.
Wait a second.
All elements of the plot relied on convincing his supporters about...
Why do they keep talking about the election? Nobody's talking about Jan 6.
Demonstrate the 2020 election was not stolen. The American people...
Wait.
...will present evidence that Mr. Trump's claims of election fraud were false, that he and his closest advisors knew those claims were false, but they continued to...
Where's the evidence for January 6th?
Right up until the moments before a mob of Trump supporters...
She says they're going to present evidence about the election.
The Trump campaign used these false claims of election fraud to raise hundreds of millions of dollars from supporters who were told their donations were for the legal fight in the courts. But the Trump campaign didn't use the money for that. The big lie was also a big ripoff. The former president laid the groundwork for these false claims well in advance of the election. As early as April 2020, Mr. Trump claimed that the only way he could lose an election would be as a result of fraud.
You know the things with bundling and all of the things that are happening with votes by mail, where thousands of votes are gathered, and I'm not going to say which party does it, but thousands of votes are gathered and they come in and they're dumped in a location, and then all of a sudden you lose elections that you think you're going to win.
The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election.
This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well.
Mr. Trump decided even before the election that regardless of the facts and the truth, if he lost the election, he would claim it was rigged. Mr. Trump was right about one thing. It did not end well. On election night, Mr. Trump claimed even before the votes were counted that his loss was a result of fraud. Now, Thursday, we had testimony from Attorney General Barr.
They still talking about the election. I thought this was a January 6th hearing.
Of Mr. Trump's fraud claims. Barr told Trump directly that his claims were BS. Yet, after hearing the truth and that warning...
And they're showing that clip of Trump don't make him look bad. It make him look like a prophet.
You'll hear
it's prophetic.
from Attorney General Barr.
He's like, this is going to be a fraud like you've never seen before. You're right. We're witnessing it right now. This whole hearing is a fraud.
How he told Mr. Trump repeatedly that there was no merit to those claims.
This is a January 6th hearing, and we're talking about elections.
Mr. Trump's election night claims of fraud were made without regard to the truth, and before it was even possible to look for evidence of fraud. Attorney General Barr wasn't alone. You'll see and hear today
where's the evidence?
Other Department of Justice officials and senior advisors to Mr. Trump that they told him the claims he was making were not supported by evidence.
Okay.
The election fraud claims were false.
Okay.
Mr. Trump's closest advisors knew it. Mr. Trump knew it. That didn't stop him from pushing the false claims and urging his supporters to, quote, fight like hell, to, quote, take back their country. After he lost the election, various legal challenges were made. You'll hear testimony today from a renowned Republican election litigation lawyer who will explain the normal process by which candidates challenge an election. Rather than accept the results of the election and the decisions of the courts, Mr. Trump pursued a different strategy. He tried to convince the American people the election had been stolen. Many of his supporters believed him, and many still believe him today. The attack on January 6th was a direct and predictable result of Mr. Trump's decision to use false claims of election fraud to overturn the election and to cling to power. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Oh, that's the claim that they're making.
Thank you very much. I now welcome our first witness.
She's trying to say.
We're joined today by former Fox News politics editor Chris
Trump
Stilwell.
was instigating
Bill Stepien,
the January
President
6th
Trump's
with
former
stoking the
campaign
fires
manager,
with
was subpoenaed to be here
election
and was in
fraud
Washington
claims.
this morning, prepared to testify. Kevin Marino, Mr. Stepien's attorney, is here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Marino, for coming. And he has advised us that Mr. Stepien's wife went into labor this morning. Mr. Stepien unexpectedly had to travel to be with his wife, and we wish him the best. Due to the depth and rigor of our investigation, we have several hours of Mr. Stepien's testimony from when we interviewed him in February, and we will be presenting that testimony today. I'll now swear in our witness. The witness will please stand and raise his right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
That guy looks like an
So help you
alien
God.
inside of a human body.
Thank you.
Looks like that guy
You may
from Men
be
in Black.
seated. Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative. I now recognize myself for questions. I want to start by showing a video that tells the story of what was going on in the Trump White House on election night in November of 2020.
Do you remember where you were on the night of the election, November the 3rd?
I was at the White House.
You know where specifically over the course of that night you spent your time within the White House?
There was an event that was organized in the residence, so I moved between the residence, a room sort of off the residence where some family members were.
I take it the president was upstairs in the residence.
He was upstairs. We were kind of on the first floor, so not upstairs. We were with mostly with Ivanka and her brothers and a couple other people who'd be coming in and out.
Can you just describe the atmosphere? What were people expecting that night when you got to the White House?
I think that there was, typically for people who show up there on election night, it's going to be a self-select, more positive environment. I think people were a little bit nervous, not knowing what was going to happen with the red wave or the red mirage as the debate was being carried out.
The Fox News Decision Desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Arizona's called. Do you remember that?
I do.
What do you remember happening where you were when Arizona was called?
There was surprise at the call.
Who was surprised?
Most everyone in the room.
Were you being one of them?
Yes.
Did that shift the atmosphere or the attitude in the White House?
Completely.
How so? Can you describe that?
Because Fox News was the first one to go out and say that.
So was it anger kind of directed towards Fox News for making a call more so than like disappointment that maybe the campaign lost Arizona?
All the above.
So both anger and disappointment.
Both disappointed with Fox and concerned that maybe our data or our numbers weren't accurate.
Were you in the White House residence during the sort of past midnight into the early morning hours of November 4th?
Yes, oh sure. It went over beyond midnight, yes.
Do you remember Rudy Giuliani being at the White House on election night and into the early hours the next morning?
I do.
What do you remember about when he came?
Exactly, Trish.
He was I had heard that he was upstairs, in that aforementioned reception area, and he was looking to talk to the president, and it was suggested instead that he come talk to several of us down off the map room.
You said that you had heard that Mr. Giuliani wanted to talk to the president, and then he was directed your way. Did you end up talking to Mr. Giuliani when he was directed your way?
I did.
What was that conversation?
A lot of conversations were directed my way. A few of us, myself, Jason Miller, Justin Clark, and Mark Meadows, gathered in a room off the map room to listen to whatever Rudy presumably wanted to say to the president.
Was there anyone in that conversation who, in your observation, had too much to drink?
Like Mayor Giuliani.
Tell me more about that. What was your
Damn, he
observation
snitched
about
on him.
his potential intoxication during that discussion?
He said
about
Rudy Giuliani was
what
sauced.
the president should say when he's addressed the nation on election night.
And the mayor was definitely intoxicated, but I do not know that his level of intoxication when he spoke with the president, for example.
Were you part of any discussions with the people I mentioned, Mr. Stepien, Mr. Meadows, or anyone else, about whether the president should make any sort of speech on election night?
I mean, I spoke to the president. They may have been present, but President spoke to the president several times that night.
There were suggestions by, I believe it was Mayor Giuliani, to go and declare victory and say that we'd won it outright.
It was far too early to be making any calls like that. Ballots were still being counted. Ballots were still going to be counted for days. And it was far too early to be making any proclamation like that.
I remember saying that, to the best of my memory, and I was saying that we should not go and declare victory until we had a better sense of the numbers.
Okay, can you be more specific about that conversation, in particular what Mayor Giuliani said, your response, and then anybody else in the room's response?
I think effectively Mayor Giuliani was saying, we won it. They're stealing it from us. Where'd all the votes come from? We need to go say that we won. And essentially that anyone who didn't agree with that position was being weak.
What was your view at the time as to what he should or shouldn't say?
I don't know that I had a firm view as to what he should say in that circumstance. The results were still being counted. It was becoming clear that the race would not be called on election night.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but we proud of the race we ran, and we think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this the next day or the next day whenever we had something to say.
And did anybody who was a part of that conversation disagree with your message?
Yes.
Who was that?
The president disagreed with that. I don't recall the particular words. He thought I was wrong. He told me so, and that they were gonna go in a he was gonna go in a different direction.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election.
Mr. Steiwalt, did President Trump have any basis to declare victory on November 4th, 2020? Thank you. Mr. Stepien also testified that President Trump had no basis for declaring victory at that point in time.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell too early to call the race, but we proud of the race we ran, and we think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this the next day or the next day whenever we had something to say.
Thank you. Mr. Stilwell, after the votes were counted, who won the presidential election of 2020?
Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. of the great state of Delaware.
Thank you. That's the bottom line. We had an election. Mr. Trump lost, but he refused to accept the results of the democratic process. Pursuant to Section 5C8 of House Resolution 503, I now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schauwald, I'd like you to explain a term that was thrown around a lot during the election, and that's the so-called red mirage. What does that mean?
So in the 40 or 50 years, let's say, that Americans have increasingly chosen to vote by mail or early or absentee, Democrats prefer that method of voting more than Republicans do. So basically, in every election, Republicans win election day and Democrats win the early vote. And then you wait and start counting, and it depends on which ones you count first, but usually it's election day votes that get counted first. And you see the Republicans shoot ahead, and then the process of bailing and binding and unbinding all those mail-in votes. In some states like Pennsylvania refuse to count the votes first, so you have to wait for all of that to come in. So in every election, certainly a national election, you expect to see the Republican with a lead, but it's not really a lead. When you put together a jigsaw puzzle, it doesn't matter which piece you put in first, it ends up with the same image. So for us, who cares? But that's because no candidate had ever tried to avail themselves of this quirk in the election counting system. We had gone to pains, and I'm proud of the pains we went to make sure that we were informing viewers that this was going to happen, because the Trump campaign and the president had made it clear that they were going to try to exploit this anomaly. And we knew it was going to be bigger because the percentage of early votes was higher, right? We went from about 45% of the votes being early and absentee to, because of the pandemic, that increased by about 50%. So we knew it would be longer, we knew it would be more. So we wanted to keep telling viewers, hey, look, the number that you see here is sort of irrelevant because it's only a small percentage of these votes.
So this red mirage, that's really what you expected to happen on election night.
Happens every time.
Thank you, Mr. Stilwell. Now, I'd like to play a clip of Attorney General Bill Barr, who also explains what was expected to happen on election night.
They should just call this the election hearing.
Right out of the box on election night, the president claimed that there was major fraud underway. I mean, this happened, as far as I could tell, before there was actually any potential of looking at evidence. And it seemed to be based on the dynamic that at the end of the evening, a lot of Democratic votes came in, which changed the vote counts in certain states. And that seemed to be the basis for this broad claim that there was major fraud. And I didn't think much of that because people had been talking for weeks, and everyone understood for weeks that that was going to be what happened on election night.
Mr. Stepien obviously could not be with us today, and it's proper for him to be with his wife as they welcome their child. But he also had discussions with the president about the red mirage, that is, that it would be a long night and that early votes would favor him, but lots more votes would be counted over the course of the night and the days after. So let's play clip 1 from our interview with Mr. Stepien.
I recounted back to that conversation with him, in which I said, just like I said in 2016 was going to be a long night. I told him in 2020 that it was going to be a process again, as the early returns are going to be, positive, and we're going to, be watching the returns of ballots as, they rolled in thereafter.
So is it fair to say you're trying to present what you thought would be a realistic picture of what might happen over the course of that night, being election night?
That night and the days that followed. Yeah, I always told the president the truth, and I think he expected that from me, and I told him it was going to be a process. It was going to be, we're going to have to wait and see how this turned out. So I just like I did in 2016, I did the same thing in 2020.
So let's watch a short clip of President Trump speaking after he received that information from his campaign advisors.
We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
So when former President Trump said that, it contradicted what his advisors had warned would happen. We all know that mail-in ballots played an important role in the 2020 election. However, President Trump continuously discouraged mail-in voting. Mr. Stepien was so concerned about the president's position on mail-in voting that in the summer of 2020, he met with President Trump along with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Let's play clip 4.
Meeting that was had, in particular, I invited Kevin McCarthy to join the meeting, he being of like mind on the issue with me, in which we made our case for why we believed mail-in voting, not to be a bad thing for his campaign. But the president's mind was made up, and he understands, how many times to, go to the well on a particular topic.
Yeah, I understand. Tell me a little bit more about the argument that you and Mr. McCarthy made to the president in that meeting as to why it wasn't a bad thing that mail-in voting was available.
Largely two pillars to that argument, both of which I've previously mentioned. One, leaving a good deal to chance, pushing or urging your voters to vote only on election day leaves a lot to chance. That's A. And B, also previously mentioned, the fact that the Trump campaign, Republican National Committee, the Republican Party had an advantage of grassroots workers and volunteers on the ground that would allow, an advantage to enhance return rates of ballots that were mailed. Those were the two pillars of the argument.
I see. And what, if anything, do you recall Representative McCarthy saying during that meeting?
We were echoing the same argument. I mean, his words echoed mine, and vice versa on those two topics.
Mr. Stirewalt, you were at the decision desk at Fox News on election night, and you called Arizona early for President Biden, which was controversial. How did you make that call, and where did you think the race stood in the early hours of the next day?
Well, it was really controversial to our competitors who we beat so badly by making the correct call first. Our decision desk was the best in the business, and I was very proud to be a part of it. Because we had partnered with the Associated Press and the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, thanks to my colleague and
their
friend
witness
Arne
is some
Michigan,
dude from
had
Fox
built a
News.
wonderful device for forecasting the outcomes of elections. So we had a different set of data than our competitors did. We had more research, and we had a better system, and we had a great team. So what you're waiting to see is, do the actual votes match up with the expectations in the poll? The real votes are testing the quality of your poll in targeted precincts and in targeted places. And let me tell you, our poll in Arizona was beautiful. And it was doing just what we wanted it to do, and it was cooking up just right. And at some point, and I forget exactly who, but at some point it became clear that Arizona was getting ready to make a call. So we my boss, Bill Salmon, said we're not making any call until everybody says yes, because that was always our policy, unanimity. And you have to understand, in this room, you have, the best. People from academia, Democrats, Republicans, a broad cross-section of people who had worked together for a decade, who are really serious about this stuff. So we knew it would be a consequential call because it was one of 5 states that really mattered, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona were the ones that we were watching. We knew it would be significant to call any one of those 5, but we already knew Trump's chances were very small and getting smaller based on what we had seen. So we were able to make the call early. We were able to beat the competition. We looked around the room, everybody says yay, and on we go. And by the time we found out how much everybody was freaking out and losing their minds over this call, we were already trying to call the next state. We had already moved on. We were to Georgia, we were to North Carolina, we were looking at these other states. So we thought we were pleased, but not surprised.
I see.
The
after
grift.
the election, as of November 7th,
The grift.
in your judgment,
Fox
what were
said
the
we had to get
chances
the
of
grift in.
President Trump winning the election?
After that point?
Yes.
None. I mean, I guess it's always possible that you could have, a truckload of ballots be found somewhere, I suppose. But once you get into this space, ahead of today, I thought about what are the largest margins that could ever be overturned by a recount, and the kind of stuff that we heard Mike Pence talking about, sounding like a normal Republican that night when he said, we'll keep every challenge. Nothing like that. In a recount, you're talking about hundreds of votes. When we think about calling a race, one of the things that we would think about is it outside the margin of a recount? And when we think about that margin, we think about, in modern history, you're talking about 1,000 votes, 1,500 votes at the way, way outside. Normally, you're talking about hundreds of votes, maybe 300 votes that are going to change. So the idea that through any normal process in any of these states, remember, he had to do it thrice, right? He needed 3 of these states to change. And in order to do that, I mean, you're at an infant, you're better off to play the Powerball than to have that come in.
On November 7th, the other
Fox
major
News wanted
news
to be
outlets
first.
called the race for President Biden. Now, Mr. Stepien told the committee that he thought the odds were, and this is a quote, very, very, very bleak, and held a meeting with the president that same day. Let's show clip 8, video clip 8.
I mean, with each day that wore on, I mean, the trajectory of the race, on election night, Trump ahead in many states. And as that week wore on, as the 3rd became the 4th, became the 5th, and so on and so forth, and the vote by mail ballots were tabulated, Trump's lead, grew more narrow, and in some places, Biden surpassed, Trump in the vote totals. So as the week wore on, as we paid attention to those numbers multiple times a day, internally, I was feeling less confident for sure.
What was your view on the state of the election at that point?
Very, very, very bleak. We told him, the group that went over there outlined, my belief in chances for success at this point, and then we pegged it at 5, maybe 10% based on recounts that either were automatically initiated or could be initiated based on realistic legal challenges. Not
Lauren says Stepien is an op.
But it was my belief is that it was a very, very 5 to 10%. It's not a very good optimistic outlook.
Now, as President Trump and others continued to claim that the election was stolen, there were lawyers who were a part of the campaign lawyers, who were responsible for investigating the fraud claims. That includes Alex Cannon, who could not validate the claims that were being made, including those being made by the president. Let's roll video 15.
This is an email. It's two emails, actually. The first is from Alex Cannon to you and Faith McPherson. And then you forward that email on to Mark Meadows, Justin Clark, and Jason Miller, the subject being AZ Federal ID voters. If you look at the original email there, it says, Bill, we completed the AZ analysis you requested. I assume that's about Arizona. And because of the substantial uncertainty surrounding the databases, this is a highly unreliable way to identify ineligible voters. Can you explain the task that you gave to Ms. Cannon for this Arizona analysis?
Sure. Previously, I described some of my frustration with some of the claims that people would throw at President Trump regarding, need to look at this, this happened in this state or that happened in that state. And it would be, those would flow to us to look into. I talked about that before, I think.
Yeah.
This is an example of that. I recall in Arizona, someone had thrown out, I believe this to be the claim, that there were thousands of illegal citizens, people not eligible to vote, having cast their ballots in Arizona. Someone had thrown out that claim to President Trump. And with, the margins being as close as they were, as I previously described, that could potentially matter. So this wild claim is thrown out, which, on its face didn't seem, realistic or possible to me. I asked Alex to look at the claim, and I haven't read this full email, but I recall the response to that. The reality of that was not illegal citizens voting in the election. I think it was like overseas voters voting in the election. So obviously, people who were eligible to vote.
When these findings were passed up the chain to President Trump, he became frustrated and he replaced the campaign's legal team. Let's play clip 14.
I think the president, it was during the second week where things like you displayed were occurring, where he was, growing increasingly unhappy with, his team, me less so because I was less involved at this point, but still me, growing increasingly unhappy with Justin Clark. And that kind of, paved the way for, Justin to be moved out and Mayor Giuliani to be moved in as the person in charge of, the legal side of the campaign and, for all intents and purposes, the campaign at that point.
Now, when Mr. Stepien became campaign manager, he was the second Trump campaign manager for the 2020 race, and there were only about 100.
Still nothing about January 6th. That's correct, VJ.
So let's play the video.
I inherited a campaign that was, the day I was hired was, I believe, President Trump's low point in the 2020 daily average polling against President Biden. It was a campaign at a low point in the polls. It was structurally and fiscally deficient. There was a great deal wrong with the campaign in both of those in both of those areas. So most of my day spent fixing and I think I took over with 115 days left in the campaign. Most of my time was spent fixing the things that could be fixed with 115 days left in the campaign.
Mr. Stepien has been in the campaign field for a long time, and he worked for lots of different candidates and campaigns. He testified to this committee about his concerns given the claims that Mr. Giuliani and Ms. Powell and their team were making publicly. Let's play clip 15.
Okay, and was it important for you, Mr. Stepien, to sort of pull back just for your own professional reputation? You didn't want to be associated with some of what you were hearing from the Giuliani team and others that sort of stepped in the wake of your departure?
I didn't mind being categorized. There were two groups of, we called them kind of my team and Rudy's team. I didn't mind being characterized as being part of Team Normal, as reporters, kind of started to do around that point in time. I said, hours ago, early on that, I've been doing this for a long time, 25 years, and I've spanned, political ideologies from Trump to McCain to Bush to Christie, and, I can work under a lot of circumstances for a lot of varied, candidates and politicians, but situation where, and I think along the way I've built up a pretty good, I hope, a good reputation for being honest and professional. And I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional at that point in time. So that led to me stepping away.
So the president did get rid of Team Normal, and I'd like to play a clip showing that the president found the people he needed to perpetuate his claims of fraud.
They saw a big truck bringing in 100,000 ballots in garbage cans, in waste paper baskets, in cardboard boxes, and in shopping baskets. And every single one of them was for Biden, because they were being notified by Smartmatic in Frankfurt that Biden was way behind and they better come up with a lot more ballots. And we can prove every single thing I just said. If you gave me the paper ballots, I could probably turn around each one of these states. I'm absolutely convinced if you let me examine each one of those ballots, I'd pull out enough that were fraudulent that it would shake the hell out of the country.
It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm.
I remember that one of the things Mark said at some point was, you can't show an actual vote was flipped, which I found at the time to be a remarkable assertion, because you don't have to have the gun to see the body lying on the floor bleeding out with 5 bullet holes in it was killed by a gun.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts. The theory was also completely nuts, right? I mean, there's a combination of Italians, the Germans. I mean, different things have been floating around as to who was involved. I remember Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan. She has an affidavit from somebody who says they wrote a software in and something with the Philippines, and just all over the radar.
Did you ever share, Mr. Kushner, your view of Mr. Giuliani? Did you ever share your perspective about him with the president?
I guess yes.
Tell me what you said.
Basically, not the approach I would take if I was you.
Okay. And how did he react? How did President Trump react when you shared that view with him?
We said, I have confidence in Rudy.
I think I had conversations with probably all of our council who are signed up to assist on Election Day as they disengaged with the campaign. The general consensus was that the law firms were not comfortable making the arguments that Rudy Giuliani was making publicly. I seem to recall that I had a similar conversation with most all of them.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it, and that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did.
Even Sidney Powell, defending herself in a defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems, argued that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that her statements were truly statements of fact. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the witness for joining us today. The first panel is now dismissed.
What? Jay Pollan said Trump needed Hoteps surrounding him, not these snitch-made,
We've been
low-T
listening to the first
yes men who fold up.
portion of today's hearing by the House.
That's Mariah. What up, Alex? He said, I appreciate these streams. Thanks, bro.
California, Ms. Lofgren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, we presented the testimony
where's the
of
January
former
6th
Attorney
evidence?
General Bill Barr, who testified before this committee. Today, we present additional evidence, including his testimony that former President Trump started making claims of election fraud immediately after the election, and that Barr concluded the claims were untrue. Now, due to the length of Attorney General Barr's testimony, we're only going to include relevant portions at the hearing today. So let's play the video.
The department, in fact, when we received specific and credible allegations of fraud, made an effort to look into these to satisfy ourselves that they were without merit. And I was in the posture of trying to figure out, there was an avalanche of all these allegations of fraud that built up over a number of days, and it was like playing whack-a-mole because something would come out one day and then the next day it would be another issue. Also, I was influenced by the fact that all the early claims that I understood were completely bogus and silly and usually based on complete misinformation. And so I didn't consider the quality of claims right out of the box to give me any feeling that there was really substance here.
For the first time since the election, the Attorney General spoke personally with the President on November 23rd, and this was at the White House. Let's play the video, please.
So on November 23rd, I hadn't spoken to the President since the election, and in fact, as I said, since the middle of October, roughly. And it was a little getting awkward because obviously he had lost the election and I hadn't said anything to him. And so Cipollone said, I think it's time you come over here. And so I came over to meet with the President in the Oval Office, and Meadows and Cipollone were there. And the President, and this is leading up to this conversation with Kushner, the President said there had been major fraud and that as soon as the facts were out, the results of the election would be reversed. And he went on this for quite a while, as he's prone to do. And then he got to something that I was expecting, which is to say that apparently the Department of Justice doesn't think that it has a role of looking into these fraud claims. And I said, that has to be the campaign that raises that with the state. The department doesn't take sides in elections, and the department is not an extension of your legal team. And our role is to investigate fraud, and we'll look at something if it's specific, credible, and could have affected the outcome of the election. And we're doing that, and it's just not. They're just not meritorious. They're not panning out. And as I walked out of the Oval Office, Jared was there with Dan Scavino, who ran the president's social media, and who I thought was a reasonable guy and believe is a reasonable guy. And I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me. and leaving the office, and caught up with me and said that he said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows that there's a limit to how far he can take this. And then Jared said, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
Even after his attorney general told him his claims of election fraud were false, President Trump continued to promote these claims.
I felt that things continued to deteriorate between the 23rd and the weekend of the 29th. And then on November 29th, he appeared on Maria Bartiromo's show, Sunday Futures, I believe it was, and he said that the department was missing in action.
Well, no, we had glitches where they moved thousands of votes from my account to Biden's account, and these are glitches. So they're not glitches, they're theft, they're fraud, absolute fraud. This election was over, and then they did dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps. In Michigan and Pennsylvania and all over. How the FBI and Department of Justice, I don't know, maybe they're involved, but how people are allowed to get away from this stuff with this stuff is unbelievable.
Now, spurred by what he saw, Barr told the Associated Press on December 1st that there was no
Trump said the feds might have been involved. Oh, shit.
Immediately after Attorney General Barr's statement went public, Mr. Trump berated and he nearly fired Barr. But Barr persisted in telling the president that there was no evidence to support the fraud claims.
This got under my skin, but I also felt it was time for me to say something. So I set up a lunch with the AP reporter, Mike Balsamo, and I told him at lunch, I made this statement, that to date we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. I had a later meeting scheduled at the White House at 3:00 with Meadows. This was previously scheduled, so I knew this was going to come up, and I went over there and I told my secretary that I thought I would probably be fired and told not to go home. I mean, not to go back to my office. So I said, you might have to pack up for me. And so when I got over there, I met with the chief of staff. He said the president was angry. He didn't really get into the issue of the fraud. And then I went up to Pat Cipollone's office and we were talking with each other. And word came down that he wanted us both to go to the Oval. And the president was as mad as I've ever seen him, and he was trying to control himself. And the president said, well, this is, killing me. You didn't have to say this. You must have said this because you hate Trump. You hate Trump. And then he raised the big vote dump, as he called it, in Detroit. And that, he said people saw boxes coming into the counting station at all hours of the morning and so forth. And I explained to him that at that point, I knew the exact number of precincts in Detroit. I think it was 630 something. I said, Mr. President, there are 630 precincts in Detroit, and unlike elsewhere in the state, they centralized the counting process, so they're not counted in each precinct. They're moved to counting stations, and so the normal process would involve boxes coming in at all different hours. So there's nothing. And I said, did anyone point out to you, did all the people complaining about it point out to you, you actually did better in Detroit than you did last time? I mean, there's no indication of fraud in Detroit. And I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud were bullshit. And, he was indignant about that. And I reiterated that they'd wasted a whole month on these claims on the Dominion voting machines, and they were idiotic claims. And I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines, which I found to be among the most disturbing allegations, disturbing in the sense that I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public. that there was this systemic
Yo, Barr giving a lot of
corruption in the
information
system,
without
and that
questioning
the
it,
votes
man.
didn't count, and that these machines controlled by somebody else were
He's
actually
singing.
determining it, which was complete nonsense. And it was being laid out there, and I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that, and it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
Okay, so the very next day, the president released a video rehashing some of the very same claims that his chief law enforcement officer had told him were, quote, nonsense.
Here's an example. This is Michigan. At 6:31 in the morning, a vote dump of 149,772 votes came in unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot. That batch was received in horror. We have a company that's very suspect. Its name is Dominion. With the turn of a dial or the change of a chip, you can press a button for Trump and the vote goes to Biden. What kind of a system is this?
Barr again told the president that there was nothing to these claims on December 14th.
When I walked in, sat down, he went off on a monologue saying that there was now definitive evidence involving fraud through the Dominion machines. And a report had been prepared by a very reputable cybersecurity firm, which he identified as Allied Security Operations Group, and he held up the report, and then he asked that a copy of it be made for me. And while a copy was being made, he said, this is absolute proof that the Dominion machines were rigged. The report means that I'm going to have a second term. And then he gave me a copy of the report. And as he talked more and more about it, I sat there flipping through the report and looking through it. And to be frank, it looked very amateurish to me. It didn't have the credentials of the people involved, but I didn't see any real qualifications. And the statements were made very
everything I'm reading on the internet here
like,
says
these machines were designed to engage in fraud or something to that effect.
they're
going to
focus on the elections.
Information for it, and I was somewhat demoralized.
Wednesday's hearings are going to focus on the
elections.
elections.
If he really believes this stuff, he has lost contact with he's become detached from reality. If he really believes this stuff. On the other hand, when I went into this and would, tell him how crazy some of these allegations were, there was never an indication
a potential of 8 of these hearings this month.
Interest
and a final hearing
in what the
in September, right before the November midterm elections.
Now is that the election was not stolen by fraud. And I haven't seen anything since the election that changes my mind on that, including the 2000 Mules movie.
Oh, this is a recent.
Maybe you can.
This is a recent.
2000 Mules, and people are talking about that.
Well, I mean, just in a nutshell, I just think the GBI was unimpressed with it, and I was similarly unimpressed with it because I think I was holding my fire on that to see what the photographic evidence was, because I thought, well, hell, if they have a lot of photographs of the same person dumping a lot of ballots in different boxes, that's hard to explain. So I wanted to see what the photographic evidence was, but the cell phone data is singularly unimpressive. I mean, it basically, if you take 2 million cell phones and figure out where they are physically in a big city like Atlanta or wherever, just by definition, you're going to find many hundreds of them have passed by and spent time in the vicinity of these boxes. And the premise that if you go by a box, 5 boxes or whatever it was, that's a mule is just indefensible. It by definition, you're going to have hundreds of this. I mean, I saw one contractor said, we figured out that our truck alone would account for 6 cell phone signals. This was some kind of contractor, and our route would take us by these things on a regular basis. So but then when the movie came out, I think the photographic evidence in it was completely I mean, there was a little bit of it, but it was lacking. It didn't establish widespread illegal harvesting. The other thing is people don't understand is that it's not clear that even if you can show harvesting, that changes the results of the election. The courts are not going to throw out votes and then figure out what votes were harvested and throw them out. You'd still the burden on the challenging party to show that illegal votes were cast. Votes were the result of undue influence or bribes, or there was really, the person was non compos mentis. But absent that evidence, I just didn't see courts throwing out votes anyway. I felt that before the election, it was possible to talk sense to the president. And while you sometimes had to engage in a big wrestling match with him, that it was possible to keep things on track. But I felt that after the election, he didn't seem to be listening, and I didn't think it was, that I was inclined not to stay around if he wasn't listening to advice from me or his other cabinet secretaries.
So on December 14th, Barr quit. Now, the Attorney General wasn't the only person who told the president that his claims were false. Other officials and close advisors told him the same thing.
Other than try to address a counterfactual or a hypothetical, let me just say there were instances where the president would say, people are telling me this, or I've heard this, or I saw on television, this impropriety in Atlanta or Pennsylvania or something, and we were in a position to say, our people have already looked at that, and we know that you're getting bad information, that's not correct. It's been demonstrated to be incorrect from our point of view, and been debunked.
A month and a half or so after the election day, and at that meeting, various allegations of fraud were discussed, and Eric and Pat.
Where's the Jan 6 evidence? You're wasting our taxpayer dollars.
The president included that none of the allegations had been substantiated to the point where they could be.
You have nothing
for any
litigation. You was counting on Stepien.
To the election.
Stepien said, "Oops, sorry, having a baby today."
President Trump's own vice president and his top advisors also knew that there wasn't evidence to support the claims that the president was making.
Anyone else other than Mr. Meadows who asked you about the status outside of your legal group, Mr. Morgan and the others you mentioned, anyone else who asked you the status of what you were finding in your assessment of it?
Yes, sir.
Who's that?
Peter Navarro.
When did you talk to Mr. Navarro?
Mid-November.
Around the same time as Mr. Meadows?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about that conversation.
I recall him asking me questions about Dominion and maybe some other categories of allegations of voter fraud. And I remember telling him that I didn't believe the Dominion
Damn, they really just wasting time with this.
because I thought the hand recount in Georgia
They really wasting time.
would resolve any issues with a technology problem and with Dominion or Dominion flipping votes. And I mentioned at that time that the CISA Chris Krebs had recently released a report saying that the election was secure. And I believe Mr. Navarro accused me of being an agent of the deep state working with Chris Krebs against the president. And I never took another phone call from Mr. Navarro.
Anyone else besides Mr. Meadows, Mr. Navarro, Mr. Hirschman that you had discussions with inquiring about what you were finding in your review of the allegations that were pouring in?
I believe I had about a 15-second conversation with the vice president about it as well.
When was that?
During one of the visits to the White House. I don't know which one. I think it was the first one in November. I had met him briefly at the campaign, and he remembered me and saw me. And he asked what I was doing on the campaign, and I told him that, you know, we were looking into some of the issues related to voter fraud. And he asked me, I don't remember his exact words, but he asked me if we were finding anything. And I said that I didn't believe we were finding it, or I was not personally finding anything sufficient to alter the results of the election. And he thanked me. That was our interaction.
At a later hearing, you'll hear live testimony from the former acting Deputy Attorney General of the Department of Justice, Rich Donahue. But now I'd like to play a portion of his testimony.
I tried to, again, put this in perspective and to try to put it in very clear terms to the president.
Ken Hotep said, remember they told us they Shanghai 2020 in Time magazine February last year. Word, classic. Jabari said Barr is making great sound bites for CNN and MSNBC. Word.
We're doing our job. Much of the
Barr was
info
up
you're
there
getting
just
is
giving out
false.
all kinds of information.
And then I went into, for instance, this thing
you
from
know, we
Michigan,
had a taco that
report
day.
about 68% error
Hot
rate.
sauce. Damn,
Reality is it
detail.
was only 0.0063% error rate, less than 1 in 15,000. So the president accepted that. He said, okay, fine, but what about the others? And again, this gets back to the point that there were so many of these allegations that when you gave him a very direct answer on one of them, he wouldn't fight us on it, but he would move to another allegation. So then I talked about a little bit about the Pennsylvania truck driver. This is another allegation that had come up. And this claim was by a truck driver who believed, perhaps honestly, that he had transported an entire tractor-trailer truck full of ballots from New York to Pennsylvania. And this was, again,
What
out
the
there in
fuck
public
happened to the screen?
and discussed. And I essentially said, look, we looked at that allegation. We looked at both ends, both
Why
the
did they
people
do
who loaded
that?
the truck and the people who unload the truck. And that allegation was not supported by the evidence.
What the fuck?
Again, he said, okay. And then he said,
That
no,
was weird.
I didn't mention that one.
Sorry
what
about
about
that.
the others?
It's really weird.
And I said, okay, well, with regard to Georgia, we looked at the tape, we interviewed the witnesses. There is no suitcase. The president kept fixating on this suitcase that supposedly had fraudulent ballots and that the suitcase was rolled out from under the table. And I said, no, sir, there is no suitcase. You can watch that video over and over. There is no suitcase. There is a wheeled bin where they carry the ballots, and that's just how they move ballots around that facility. There's nothing suspicious about that at all. I told him that there was no multiple scanning of the
Yeah,
ballots.
it's definitely
One of the
election
Florida
play in
allegations was they were
November.
taking one ballot and scanning it through 3 or 4 or 5 times to rack up votes, presumably for Vice President Biden. I told him that the video did not support that. Then he went off on double voting. At the top of the next page, he said, dead people are voting. Indians are getting paid to vote. He meant people on Native American reservations. He said there's lots of fraud going on here. Told him flat out that much of the information he's getting is false and or just not supported by the evidence. We look at the allegations, but they don't pan out.
Barr and his advisors were not the only ones who
Paying
determined
Indians.
that the president's allegations regarding Dominion voting machines were false. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record of this hearing reports issued by the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, that addressed and rejected the claims of manipulation of voting machines in the 2020 election.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also ask unanimous consent to include in the record a report prepared by the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee that disproved claims of election fraud in Michigan, as well as a statement by 59 of the country's leading election security scientists, noting the absence of any credible evidence that the 2020 election had been altered through technical compromise, and 5 other reports from organizations and individuals
She looks like she smells like
confirming
mothballs.
there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election or describing the spread of the former president's lies.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Pursuant to the order of the committee for today, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
And
All right.
with that, Committee Chair Benny Thompson of Mississippi says that, as you just heard, the committee will go into recess. What we've been hearing over the last hour and a little more than 15 minutes is a pretty much nonstop array of former Trump administration officials, advisor to the former president, members of the Trump campaign, all one after another explaining why he did not win the 2020 election, why his...
This is wild. Rudy the Vet Russo said Hotep Jesus Bill Barr was U.S. attorney in Arkansas under the Clintons when all of the was coming in. Check it out. Oh, man. Oh, my God. So this is basically an election hearing. You know, oh, Trump claimed that there was fraudulent elections. And they're just going to I guess, keep repeating that and showing more and more evidence of that same thing. I mean, like, how much evidence you got to show, really? It's just really odd. It's really, really odd. Hold on one second. I'm going to go get something. I'll be right back, and I'll give you some audio.
From 2004.
Why do black men got to be chairman, though? They always pulling black people out the woodwork for this shit.
Of Secretaries of State. And Peniel Joseph, he's Associate Dean for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and the Barbara Jordan Chair in Ethics and Political Values at the University of Texas at Austin. Let me just come quickly to you, Peniel Joseph, as someone who has not just looked at American history, but certainly paid close attention to what's happened since the 2020 election, and ask you what you make of this collection of evidence that a lot of it videotaped comments from these former Trump officials and advisors about the president's claims of fraud.
Hi, Judy. This is truly extraordinary, the testimony that we've been listening to, and the behavior both of the president, his advisors, the attorney general. The only thing we can liken this to in the modern era would be the Watergate hearings, but we have to go back to Reconstruction to think about, allegations of voter fraud, especially when we think about the way in which much of the focus was on where black people voted in Detroit. I love the testimony about Detroit, Atlanta, places where there was predominantly black votes that had put Biden over the top. And that's very similar to the period of Reconstruction. We're thinking about 1865, really all the way up until Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898. And these efforts by then Democrats to say that black Republicans were fraudulently voting in places like Georgia and Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, the entire old Confederacy. So we've truly never seen anything like this. And I would say that what's extraordinary is that democracy is based on trust. And we can see that the trust has been really violated by both the former president, but that violation continues even after he's left the White House. So this is having reverberations that we're going to continue to see in this decade.
Struggling to find people to fill time. These people are he's struggling to make a point.
Hasn't ended the
a good point that matters. Ken and Hotep said they can't challenge the 6 because he beat it in impeachment.
Election.
And we should point out, former President Trump continues to make these allegations, claims without any basis in fact that the election was stolen. Trey Grayson, as we said, former Secretary of State in Kentucky. I was struck by both the former Attorney General Bill Barr and by the former acting Deputy Attorney General Rick Donahue, who were very specific about claims of fraud that they had looked into and were simply not proven. As someone who's worked in elections as you have, what did you make of that?
Well, I saw Republicans telling a Republican president that there wasn't anything there. I think you're right about the law enforcement angle to this. You know, one of the things we do in elections is we have opportunities for law enforcement to investigate, for election administrators to check math and do campaigns can ask for recounts. We do all these things to make sure that we get the right outcome. And sometimes that takes a few weeks.
Yeah, that's enough for him. I really don't want to hear these people speak. Tricia said the government is racist and it is white supremacy, but we will defend it forever if it means getting on TV and saying stuff about Trump. The grift is undefeated. This is terrible. Some people actually went out and voted for this guy, though. They actually went out and voted for Biden. Yeah, you said everybody bills doubled. They know everybody is wearing MAGA hats in 2024, right? Yeah, it's gonna be a red wave. This is storytelling leading bystanders. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Jabari said bootleg and sissified, pasteurized, homogenized, stupid shines and white liberals. Oh man, hold on. Where's my sound bite at?
Oh, bootlicking, buck dancing, scratching, shuffling.
The great Khalid Muhammad. Wait, what's this?
Come on, man.
I forgot I had that in here. Came out a little loud, but I feel like I haven't. I think I started setting this soundboard up, or at least the second soundboard. Oh, I got this one too.
This is a sick Negro.
Damn, what was I gonna say? Somebody said something. Was it Trish? I think it was Trish. Where is it? Government is racist and it is white supremacy. We defend it forever if it means getting on TV and saying stuff about Trump. Yeah, it's like the grift is just undefeated. So you better be glad Uncle Hotep ain't here. For real. The grift is undefeated. These people are going to find a way. You see, here's the thing. Here's the thing with socialism. As we know, socialism is centralization of power within the hands of a democratic republic. And the individuals in these seats of this democratic republic are closely attached to power, and usually when you're attached to power, you're attached to wealth. So you'll see these Negroes, like this guy here on the screen, right? You know, this guy probably does well for himself, but he would complain and say, oh, you know, job opportunities aren't available to black people, so on and so forth. He might say something like that. Not saying him specifically, but that archetype.
Trump lost the election. He continues to win because he sowed these partisan divisions that continue to impact all of us. And I think figures like Bill Barr, Liz Cheney, very important in terms of saying that, look, this election was not stolen. We want to defend democracy. So we definitely need Republicans who, however much you might disagree with Democrats, are acting in good faith and saying we all believe and love America and American democracy.
Along with Peniel Joseph and Trey Grayson, also joining me, correspondent Lisa Desjardins.
Yeah, anytime they say democracy, you just gotta know you can't trust them. If they use the word democracy, you can't trust them. It's just like a talking point, keyword.
Watching all this from the White House.
Keep in mind, they said this break was supposed to be 10 minutes. How long has it been, y'all?
Use so much of the videotape testimony of these individuals, from the former Attorney General to campaign advisors, one after another. Most of the hour and 15 minutes has been spent with that video.
That's right. And it's almost interesting to me that they wanted Bill Stepien, the former campaign manager, in person, because his video testimony, of course, we have to acknowledge it was edited and we haven't seen the full transcript of his testimony. But the videos that we saw from Bill Stepien today in committee was very clear and seemed like exactly what the committee was trying to stack in terms of its evidence, that there were top Trump officials, in fact, the very top, the campaign manager, advising former President Trump that, in fact, he had not won the election. He should not declare it won. Justice Department officials.
They just keep repeating like the same thing over and over again.
This is a very comprehensive, compelling, and just from this first take, without...
So they just shuffle around and one voice to another saying the same thing over and over again and call that news coverage.
In fact, it goes the other way. We heard evidence today that the error rate in this election, and we've heard this before, was minuscule, that this was perhaps one of the least fraudulent elections in American history.
Which, of course, raises a question again, you know, how much can the committee persuade those who've been listening to President Trump and who've accepted the arguments he's been making? Amna Nawaz, watching all this from the White House. Amna, I think President Biden's name certainly came up one time when Chris Stirewalt, the former political editor at Fox News Channel, who was fired, let go because he was one of those who made sure that Fox was announcing that when they realized that President Biden was winning Arizona, they announced it. And when he was asked who did he believe had won the election, he said Joseph Robinette Biden. We know the White House is watching all this, but not directly participating.
That's right, Judy. I found it notable in that hearing, Chris Stirewalt taking great professional pride in their political desk's ability to call it first and call it accurately, saying they had this beautiful Arizona poll that ended up proving true. But you're absolutely right. Here at the White House, I'm told we should not expect much commentary from them with regards to the hearings today.
So who do we have? We had an attorney up here for Stepien, and then we had the Fox News dude. Those are like the witnesses they came up with.
This from the White House. One is just that the White House wants to make it clear this is an independent, bipartisan.
They got Barr on tape snitching, he just spilling all the beans.
That includes from the president. Indeed, when he's been asked about this before, as he was end of last week, the president would only talk about the importance of something like this moving forward in a thorough and credible.
You know what makes all this funny? They're acting like Trump said this like in private or like on some secret cable, right? Some emails that leaked, right? Like he was hiding his opinions from us. Meanwhile, they're showing us clips of Trump saying this on Fox News. He wasn't hiding his opinion. We all knew, the whole nation knew what he thought about these elections. So why are you presenting this stuff as evidence as if you have something? This is absolutely terrible. Here come these communists now.
On election night itself, the President Trump repeatedly told again and again there was no path forward, him going out that evening and saying, frankly, we did win this election. Judy?
It was just relentless. In fact, the commentary, Amna, from, as we said, from the former Attorney General, from attorneys, White House attorneys, others who were advising the campaign chairman, Bill Stepien. Here we are back. The committee's back. This is Chairman Benny Thompson.
I now welcome our second panel of witnesses. We're joined today by B.J. Pack, Al Smith, and Ben Ginsberg. Mr. Pack is the former United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. Mr. Smith is a former city commissioner for the city of Philadelphia, where he served for more than 10 years. Mr. Ginsberg is one of the leading election law attorneys in the country and has represented Republican presidential candidates in election litigation dating back to 2000, where he represented George W. Bush in the Bush v. Gore litigation. I will now swear in our witnesses.
That nigga just said 22,000.
Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm on the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Thank you. Please be seated. Let the record reflect the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Pursuant to Section 5C8 of House Resolution 503, I now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before the break, I think you all heard Mr. Barr and Mr. Donahue talk about the false claims that Mr. Trump and his supporters made about suitcases of fake ballots in Georgia. We have a witness here today who thoroughly investigated that issue. Mr. Pack, I want to thank you for appearing before us today. You were appointed by President Trump to serve as a U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, and you served from 2017 until January of 2021. You were the lead federal prosecutor there and worked for the Department of Justice under then Attorney General Bill Barr. Now, were you ever asked by Attorney General Barr to investigate claims of voter fraud in the 2020 election? And if so, what were those claims?
Thank you, Congressman Lofgren. Thank you for the question. Approximately December 4th, I believe, of 2020, Attorney General Barr and I had a conversation about an unrelated case to the case at issue. At the end of the conversation, Mr. Barr had asked me if I had seen a certain videotape that was being reported in the news where Mr. Giuliani, in a Senate subcommittee hearing that was held the day before, May 3rd, showed a videotape of a purportedly a security tape at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, which is also in Fulton County in the city of Atlanta. Yes. At the time, Mr. Barr asked me that he had made a public statement that he had not seen any widespread election fraud that would question the outcome of the election. And because of the videotape and the serious allegation that Mr. Giuliani was making with respect to the suitcase full of ballots purported in the video, he asked me to find out what I could about it, because he had envisioned that in some days after our call that he was going to go to the White House for a meeting, and then that issue might come up. He asked me to make it a priority to get to the bottom of, to try to substantiate the allegation made by Mr. Giuliani.
Thank you. I understand the Georgia Secretary of State's office investigated those State Farm Arena allegations and didn't find any evidence of fraud. What did you find when your office conducted its own investigation?
We found that the suitcase full of ballots, the alleged black suitcase that was being seen pulled from under the table, was actually an official lockbox where ballots were kept safe. We found out that there was a mistake in terms of misunderstanding that they were done counting ballots or tallying ballots for the night, and the partisan watchers that was assigned by each of the respective parties were announced to send home. But once they realized the mistake, someone from the Secretary of State's office had indicated that, no, we're not done for the night. You need to go ahead and continue counting. So once they packed up the lockbox full of ballots, they brought back the official ballot box again.
Wait, what?
Tally the ballots from the lockbox.
Whoa.
Unfortunately, during the Senate hearing, Mr. Giuliani only played a clip that showed them pulling out the official ballot box from under the table and referring to that as a smoking gun of fraud in Fulton County. But in actuality, in review of the entire video, it showed that that was actually an official ballot box that was kept underneath the tables. And then we saw them pack up because of the announcement that they thought they were done for the night. And then once the announcement was made that you should continue counting, they brought the ballot box out and they continued to count. The FBI interviewed the individuals that are depicted in the videos that purportedly were double, triple counting of the ballots, and determined that nothing irregular happened in the counting, and the allegations made by Mr. Giuliani were false.
Thank you very much. I'd like to play again a testimony from Mr. Donahue, who appeared before the committee before today.
So the people working the ballots don't know what time they get off?
You talked at some length about whether or not the White House or the president was informed about the Antrim report. On the results of the investigations, the interviews that had gone on Fulton County, how would those results have been communicated to the White House, to the president?
I don't know how they were initially communicated. I do know that they came up in subsequent conversations with the president, and Dag Rose and I essentially told him we looked into that, and it's just not true.
Okay, so he was informed.
I told the president myself that several times in several conversations, that these allegations about ballots being smuggled in a suitcase and run through the machine several times, it was not true. That we looked at the video, we interviewed the witnesses, it was not true.
Mr. Pack, after you left the U.S. Attorney's Office on January 4th, 2021, did the next U.S. Attorney there, I think Mr. Trump's personal pick, Bobby Christine, did he investigate any remaining claims of fraud? And if so, did he find any evidence that supported the president's claims of voter fraud?
It is my understanding that Mr. Christine continued any investigations that were pending at the time of my departure, but he was unable to find any evidence of fraud that affected the outcome of the election.
So after investigating the president's and Mr. Giuliani's claims about voter fraud in Georgia, is it your view today that there was no evidence of widespread fraud sufficient to undermine confidence in the outcome of the election in Georgia?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Pack. And I want to thank you also for the service that you've given to our country. We appreciate that. Next, I'd like to turn to President Trump's false allegations about election integrity in Philadelphia. The Attorney General discussed these allegations at some length.
You know, the idea, the president has repeatedly suggested that there was some kind of outpouring of unexpected votes in inner city areas like Philadelphia. As recently as January 13th, when he walked off the NPR set, he was asked by the interviewer, what's your evidence of fraud? And he said more people voted in Philadelphia than there were voters. And that was absolute rubbish. The turnout in Philadelphia was in line with the state's turnout. And in fact, it was not as impressive as many suburban counties. And there was nothing strange about the Philadelphia turnout. It wasn't like there was all these unexpected votes that came out in Philadelphia. So, I think once you actually look at the votes, and then there's an obvious explanation. For example, in Pennsylvania, Trump ran weaker than the Republican ticket generally. He ran weaker than two of the state candidates. He ran weaker than the congressional delegation running for federal Congress, and he ran weaker than the Republican, I think. I haven't looked at this recently, but he generally was a weak element on the Republican ticket. So that does not suggest that the election was stolen by fraud.
How about Pennsylvania and Bill McSwain? We were talking to the U.S. Attorney in Philadelphia about an alleged discrepancy between the number of absentee ballots issued and the number of ballots cast.
Right. So that was one of the big ones for a period of time. I think that was raised at Gettysburg by Giuliani or something like that. But it kept on being repeated, and I found it annoying because it didn't seem that it was right. So I called McSwain, and he got back to me. He said, no, the problem is that Mastriano threw out this number, and what he did was he mixed apples and oranges. He took the number of applications for the Republican primary, and he compared it to the number of absentee votes cast in the general election. But once you actually go and look and compare apples to apples, there's no discrepancy at all. And, that's one of the, I think at some point I covered that with the president.
We have another witness here today who has detailed knowledge about the election process in Philadelphia. Mr. Schmidt, at the time of the 2020 presidential election, you were serving as the only Republican member of Philadelphia's 3-member city commission, which is responsible for overseeing elections throughout the city. Is that correct?
That's correct, Congressperson.
So President Trump made numerous claims regarding fraudulent voting practices in Philadelphia, including the claim that dead people were voting. In fact, Mr. Giuliani told Pennsylvania state legislators that 8,000 dead people voted in Pennsylvania. You investigated those claims of voter fraud. Can you tell us what you found?
Not only was there not evidence of 8,000 dead voters voting in Pennsylvania, there wasn't evidence of 8. We took seriously every case that was referred to us, no matter how fantastical, no matter how absurd, and took every one of those seriously, including these.
As it turns out, even Mr. Trump's campaign lawyers knew that the dead voter claims weren't valid.
I guess the crooks in Philadelphia are disappointed in this. They only submitted 8,021 ballots from dead people, mail-in ballots for dead people. It's probably easier for dead people to submit mail-in ballots than it is to vote in person.
Really was at this stage of his life and the same ability to manage things at this level or not. And obviously, I think Bernie Kerik publicly said it. They never proved the allegations that they were making, and they were trying to develop.
Mr. Schmidt, on November 11th, 2020, President Trump tweeted about you, saying, and here's a quote, "A guy named Al Schmidt, a Philadelphia commissioner and so-called Republican, or rhino, is being used big time by the fake news media to explain how honest things were with respect to the election in Philadelphia. He refuses to look at a mountain of corruption, dishonesty. We win." As a result of that tweet and the CNN interview you gave where you stated the dead voter claims in Pennsylvania were false, you and your staff were subjected to disturbing threats. Can you tell us about that?
The threats prior to that tweet, and on some level it feels almost silly to talk about a tweet, but we can really see the impact that they have, because prior to that, the threats were pretty general in nature. Corrupt election officials in Philadelphia are going to get what's coming to them. You're what the Second Amendment is for. You're walking into the lion's den, all sorts of things like that. After the president tweeted at me by name, calling me out the way that he did, the threats became much more specific, much more graphic, and included not just me by name, but included members of my family by name, their ages, our address, pictures of our home, just every bit of detail that you could imagine. That was what changed with that tweet.
Behind me are redacted threats that you received, that you provided to the committee. Now, we redacted portions of the text to protect your family. Mr. Schmidt, I think I speak for all of my colleagues when I say we are deeply sorry for what you and your loved ones have been through. And I also want to thank you for your service to your country and for standing up for the rule of law. I want to thank both Mr. Pack and Mr. Schmidt for their service, their testimony, and for standing up for the rule of law. Now I'd like to turn to another subject. The courts in our country provide a legitimate venue for campaigns to challenge what they view as irregular election practices. Now, courts have the final say on how the law applies to those challenges. We have a renowned legal expert here to address the Trump campaign's activities in court. Mr. Ginsburg, you've spent your entire career representing Republicans in election-related litigation. You served as the National Counsel on Republican presidential campaigns in 2000, in 2004, and in 2012. You played a key role in the 2000 Florida recount that led to the Supreme Court's decision in Bush v. Gore. You served as the co-chair of the Presidential Commission on Election Administration. I think it's fair to say you're the most prominent Republican lawyer who's litigated in the election field. Now, you've analyzed the Trump campaign's litigation pretty carefully. What's the normal process for post-election litigation? How is the Trump campaign's different from the kinds of post-election litigation you've been involved in and know about?
In the normal course of things, any campaign on the night of the election and the days after will do a couple of different things. One is that they'll analyze precinct results to look for abnormalities in the results, and they'll send people to those precincts to ask more questions. Secondly, all campaigns will have poll watchers and poll workers and observers in the polling place. And so campaigns will talk to those people if they saw any irregularities that could cause problems in the election. Now, the Trump campaign talked pre-election about having 50,000 poll workers. So presumably, they did have eyes on the ground in all these places. And so in the normal course of things, a campaign will analyze the reports that come in. Trump campaign had a couple of basic problems, however. Number one, the 2020 election was not close. In 2000, that was 537 and close. In this election, the most narrow margin was 10,000 and something in Arizona, and you just don't make up those sorts of numbers in recounts. And when the claims of fraud and irregularities were made, you've heard very compelling testimony from Mr. Stepien, from Matt Morgan, from Alex Cannon about those claims and how they didn't believe them. And so that put the Trump campaign on sort of a process of bringing cases without the actual evidence that you have to have in which the process is designed to bring out.
So are you aware of any instance in which a court found the Trump campaign's fraud claims to be credible?
No, there was never that instance. In all the cases that were brought, and I've looked at the more than 60 that include more than 180 counts, and no, the simple fact is that the Trump campaign did not make its case.
The Select Committee has identified 62 post-election lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign and his allies between November 4th, 2020 and January 6th, 2021. Those cases resulted in 61 losses and only a single victory, which actually didn't affect the outcome for either candidate. Despite those 61 losses, President Trump and his allies claim that the courts refused to hear them out, and as a result, they never had their day in court. Mr. Ginsburg, what do you say about the claims that Mr. Trump wasn't given an opportunity to provide the evidence they had of voter fraud? Did they in fact, did they have their day in court?
They did have their day in court. About half of those
Yo, shout out to my LA people. I'll be in LA this weekend.
procedural stage for a lack of standing, the proper people didn't bring the case, or there wasn't sufficient evidence and it got dismissed on a motion to dismiss. But in the other, there was discussion of the merits that was contained in the complaints. And in no instance did a court find that the charges of fraud were real. And it's also worth noting that even if the Trump campaign complained that it did not have its day in court, there have been post-election reviews in each of the 6 battleground states that could have made a difference. And those ranged from the somewhat farcical Cyber Ninjas case in Arizona to the Michigan Senate report that was mentioned earlier, the hand recount in Georgia that Mr. Pack addressed. And in each one of those instances, there was no credible evidence of fraud produced by the Trump campaign or his supporters.
Thank you. You know, as Mr. Ginsburg has explained, there are no cases where the Trump campaign was able to convince a court that there was widespread fraud or irregularities in the 2020 election. Over and over, judges appointed by Democrats and Republicans alike directly refuted this false narrative. They called out the Trump campaign's lack of evidence for its claims, and the judges did that even in cases where they could have simply thrown out the lawsuit without writing.
I'm just trying to figure out how they tie this into January 6th. Like, I know how I would do it. You know, you say, oh, you know, you incited people in some way, like sew that together. But how does this have to do with, how are they going to tie this into January 6th?
Across the political spectrum. In Pennsylvania, a Trump-appointed judge concluded, quote, charges require specific allegations and proof. We have neither here. Another Trump-appointed judge warned that if cases like these succeeded, quote, any disappointed loser in a presidential election able to hire a team of clever lawyers could flag claimed deviations from election results and cast doubt on election results. The list goes on and on. Allegations are called, quote, an amalgamation of theories, conjecture, and speculation. In another, strained legal arguments without merit, unsupported by evidence, derived from wholly unreliable sources, a fundamental and obvious misreading of the Constitution. The rejection of President Trump's litigation efforts was overwhelming. 22 federal judges appointed by Republican presidents, including 10 appointed by President Trump himself, and at least 24 elected or appointed Republican state judges dismissed the president's claims. At least 11 lawyers have been referred for disciplinary proceedings due to bad faith and baseless efforts to undermine the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. Rudy Giuliani had his license to practice law suspended in New York, and just this week, a newly filed complaint will potentially make his suspension from practicing law in D.C. permanent. And as we've just heard from perhaps the most preeminent Republican election lawyer in recent history, the Trump campaign's unprecedented effort to overturn its election loss in court was a deeply damaging abuse of the judicial process. As stated by U.S. District Court Judge David Carter, this was, quote, a coup in search of a legal theory. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Some good words.
I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objection, members will be permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witnesses. The second panel of witnesses is now dismissed.
Shout out to Jamerson Hayes. Appreciate you. Can't hold to say everyone watching this already has their mind made up. This is a sham. David Zientara said the election wasn't rigged. It was fortified.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that we
Oh,
understand
thank
the
God.
litigation efforts by President Trump and his allies, I'd like to present additional actions taken by the Trump campaign during this time.
Oh, my God.
President Trump continued to
Jesus
push the
Christ.
stolen election narrative.
He just said
even
make some
though he
closing
and his allies
arguments.
knew that their litigation
It's
efforts,
closing statements.
making the same claim, had failed. It's worth pointing out that litigation generally does not continue past the safe harbor date of December 14th.
The horse is dead.
But the fact that this
You
litigation
done beat it
went
up.
on, well, that decision makes more
You beat it
sense
up.
when you consider the Trump campaign's fundraising tactics. Because if the litigation had stopped on December 14th, there would have been no fight to defend the election and no clear path to continue to raise millions of dollars. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd ask for unanimous consent to include in the record a video presentation describing how President Trump used the lies he told to raise millions of dollars from the American people. These fundraising schemes were also part of the effort to disseminate the false claims of election fraud.
Without objection, so
My name is Amanda Wick, and I'm Senior Investigative Counsel with the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Between Election Day and January 6th, the Trump campaign sent millions of fundraising emails to Trump
Say
supporters,
closing remarks,
sometimes
yo.
as many
What
as
is
25
this?
a day.
A commercial?
The emails claimed the, quote, left-wing mob was undermining the election, implored supporters to, quote, step up to protect the integrity of the election, and encouraged them to, quote, fight back. But as the Select Committee has demonstrated, the Trump campaign knew these claims of voter fraud were
Professionally
false,
made
yet
video
they continued
presentation.
to barrage small-dollar donors with emails, encouraging them to donate to something
All
called
nice, edited
the
and
Official
shit.
Election Defense Fund. The Select Committee discovered no such fund existed.
I don't believe there is actually a fund called the Election Defense Fund.
Is it fair to say that the Election Defense Fund was another, I think we called it a marketing tactic? Yes. And tell us about these funds as marketing tactics.
Just a topic matter where money could potentially go to be, how money could potentially be used.
The claims that the election was stolen were so successful, President Trump and his allies raised $250 million, nearly $100 million in the first week after the election. On November 9th, 2020, President Trump created a separate entity called the Save America PAC. Most of the money raised went to this newly created PAC, not to election-related litigation. The Select Committee discovered that the Save America PAC made millions of dollars of contributions to pro-Trump organizations, including $1 million to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' charitable foundation, $1 million to the America First Policy Institute, a conservative organization which employs several former Trump administration officials, $204,857 to the Trump Hotel Collection, and over $5 million to Event Strategies, Inc., the company that ran President Trump's January 6th rally on the Ellipse.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing.
The evidence developed by the Select Committee highlights how the Trump campaign aggressively pushed false election claims to fundraise, telling supporters it would be used to fight voter fraud that did not exist. The emails continued through January 6th, even as President Trump spoke on the Ellipse. 30 minutes after the last fundraising email was sent, the Capitol was breached.
Every American is entitled and encouraged to participate in our electoral process. Political fundraising is part of that. Small dollar donors use scarce disposable income to support candidates and causes of their choosing, to make their voices heard. And those donors deserve the truth about what those funds will be used for. Throughout the committee's investigation, we found evidence that the Trump campaign and its surrogates misled donors as to where their funds would go and what they would be used for. So not only was there the big lie, there was the big ripoff. Donors deserve to know where their funds are really going. They deserve better than what President Trump and his team did. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank all of our witnesses today. And I'd also like to, in particular, wish Mr. Stepien and his family all the best on the arrival of a new baby. Today's hearing, Mr. Chairman, was very narrowly focused. And in the coming days, you will see the committee move on to President Trump's broader planning for January 6th, including his plan to corrupt the Department of Justice and his detailed planning with lawyer John Eastman to pressure the Vice President, state legislatures, state officials, and others to overturn the election. Let me leave you today with one clip to preview what you will see in one of our hearings to come. This is the testimony of White House lawyer Eric Hirschman. John Eastman called Mr. Hirschman the day after January 6th, and here is how that conversation went.
I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
At the conclusion of last week's hearing, we showed you a video of rioters explaining why they had come to Washington on January 6th. It was because Donald Trump told them to be here. Today we heard about some of the lies Donald Trump embraced and amplified when it became clear he didn't have the numbers of votes to win the election. We heard about how officials at different levels of government explored claims of fraud and found no evidence. Yet the former president continued to repeat those false claims over and over again. Today, we'll end things where we did on Thursday, back on January 6th, hearing words of individuals who wanted to stop the transfer of power. We know they were there because of Donald Trump. Now we hear some of the things they believed. Without objection, I enter into the record a video presentation.
Yeah, everybody got a video presentation?
I know exactly what's going on right now. Fake election. They think they're gonna fucking cheat us out of our vote and put communist fucking Biden in office. It ain't fucking happening today, buddy. You voted?
Yes, sir.
How'd it go?
Voted early. It went well, except for the can't really trust the software. Dominion software all over.
We voted, and right in the top right-hand corner of the Dominion voting machine that we used, there was a Wi-Fi symbol with 5 bars. So that most definitely connected to the internet, without a doubt. So they stole that from us twice. We're not doing it anymore. We're not taking it anymore. So we're standing up, we're here, and whatever happens, we're not laying down again.
I'm from Pennsylvania. It didn't work. It absolutely worked. It didn't work. No. Trust the system. 200,000 people that weren't even registered voted. 430,000 votes disappeared from President Trump's tally. And you can't stand there and tell me that it worked.
I don't want to say that what we're doing is right.
This is the Proud Boys rally.
The election's being stolen. What is it going to take?
I'm pretty sure. Or no, or is that, no, that might be outside. That might be by the Capitol building.
The chair requests those in the hearing room remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members from the room. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
Okay, so I'm seeing how.
And with that, Chairman Benny Thompson gavels to a close. The second.
I'm seeing how they tied a little bit there towards the end. They started to reel it back in. and tie it to the insurrection. They had some clips there from people at the so-called insurrection. What else did I notice? There was something else I noticed. Obviously, they had the doctored videos, and these videos came out all nice and crispy, and they sort of had that all well and prepared. They had their snitches there. It's definitely an election, more an election claims hearing, and I guess that's what Jan 6 was about, right? Like, I guess that whole stop the steal style situation. But some of the most egregious videos that they didn't show, like the Ray Epps video or whatever his name is, they didn't show that video. I mean, if there was a video you would show to show, hey, this had something to do with, some sort of planned insurrection and people wanting to go in, I thought the Ray Epps tape would be perfect for them. They've completely ignored that for some reason. Not exactly sure why. I'll let the people deliberate on that. He said, wow, that clip changed my mind. What the F? Yeah. So then it's like, also, I believe they were targeting Republican. It's definitely targeting Republican voters with that hearing and saying, hey, look, Trump stole your money. Ha ha ha. And this is how he spent it. I definitely saw that angle. For a second there, I started to think if that would be effective or is being effective. It's certainly clever. I would definitely call it clever. Because like I said, the blue people's minds are made up. So who exactly are you trying to target here? So it's funny because they spent all this time with elections, and this is obviously in their best interest going into the next election to have these type of hearings, to show a very disunited coalition between Trump and the Republican Party, as you saw with Cheney and the individual from Fox News, because they expect Fox News to lean more right. What else did I notice? Especially towards the end there. Trump raised $250 million. He didn't use it for his defense fund. All very provocative allegations. I would love to hear the defense, somebody who could speak to the defense of those things. I'd love to hear what they have to say, because there's always 2 or 3 sides to every story. So I'd love to hear the other coin on that one. I don't know, on the other end, I guess we could sort of balance it out and say, well, what's the bill that taxpayers are getting billed for these hearings? How much time is being wasted, taken away from something else that could be focused on, like, the price of gases, the price of inflation, et cetera, et cetera. The price of goods overall. So yeah, we didn't see much incitation or inciting from Trump to his followers to do anything. But again, what they're claiming or accusing him of is something that we all publicly witnessed and were aware of. We knew he didn't trust the election results. And I find it to be quite hypocritical that nobody pulls up any tapes from the previous election where they claim that Trump stole the election with the Russians. Where's the Republicans to step up? Why hasn't Cheney stepped up and shown some of those tapes? Barr snitching, just singing. Cody Jones said manipulation is defined as the skillful handling, controlling, or using of something or someone. Social manipulation entails using personality and conversational skills to tailor a social situation for one's own personal gain. Thank you, Cody. Bars. There's definitely some manipulation going on. So apparently the last hearing is going to be in September, obviously right before elections, right? So a lot of this will, I think what it is they also want to, maybe I said this already, but they want to fray the Republican Party, disunite. I think there's very tactical play. So it's interesting that they're complaining about elections, but meanwhile, this is all for elections. I don't know. I'm Hotep Jesus. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for Lauren supporting as always. What up, Chad? I didn't even see Chad in here. Chad Lemoyne's in the building. Or not in the building, the virtual building, whatever. He's in the chat. You know what I mean? HotepCon 2022. Make sure you get your tickets. HotepNation.com. Hotep Jesus. Hotep and Built.